I was just thinking about what I want my walkout song to be at the Young Women's Leadership Summit this year. And I was like, should it be 70s or more modern? Because the theme is 70s, since we're debunking all the lies women were told that sprung from the feminist movement in that decade. A lot of people think, okay, well, yeah, abortion and feminism as a whole, that's what you're going to be talking about, which is true. Yes, we're going to touch on those things, but I want to go a lot deeper and spicier than that. I want to discuss things that I think will make even some conservative women uncomfortable, because I think it's important to be challenged on some of the traps even we have fallen prey to. YWLS is in Dallas, Texas, June 9th through 11th, and it's for women of all ages. Confirmed speakers so far include Riley Gaines, Kayleigh McEnany, Laura Trump, and Candace Owens, and there are way more names to be coming soon. There is a very limited number of seats, and we can't fit everyone, so get tickets sooner rather than later at tpusa.com/YWLS with code POPLITICS. It's the biggest and most unique conference in the country for conservative young women. Go to tpusa.com/YWLS with code POPLITICS. The Scandinavian mother's manifesto, if you will, I think would look a little like this. There's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothes. Fresh air is good for you. Let them play. Dirt won't hurt. And freedom with responsibility. Now, I had really never even thought about or been curious about Scandinavian parenting until this past winter, when someone told me about how moms over there let their babies sleep outside in their strollers, even in subzero temperatures. And I heard that, I'm like, I got to know more about this. So that's when I came across the parenting memoir, There's No Such Thing as Bad Weather, A Scandinavian Mom's Secrets for Raising Healthy, Resilient, and Confident Kids. Everything I read inspired me in that book and prompted me to do some reflecting on the state of outdoor play in America right now. And in many places, it's virtually non-existent, whether it's because kids would rather be on screens or because their parents think that being on screens is just a safer alternative to playing at the park. American children are going outside less and less. So how is it then that despite having the same technology available to them as us, Scandinavian families are still prioritizing being in nature? Today's guest's writings about Scandinavian parenting have been in publications such as Time and Parents.com. She is the founder of Rain or Shine Mama, a blog where she shares inspo and advice for outdoor play every day in the rain or shine or freezing cold. Plus, her latest book is called The Open Air Life. Discover the Nordic art of friluftsliv and embrace nature every day. Her first book, There's No Such Thing as Bad Weather, immediately became one of my most favorite parenting books I've ever read. Please welcome all the way from Sweden, author Linda McGurk. Linda, I wish that hospitals would give out your book as some kind of required reading for new parents or a gift. I love my country, okay? But reading your book made me long for this life in Sweden. And just if I have children one day, God willing, I know without a doubt that your book is really going to shape how I parent for the better. Were you expecting Americans to be resistant to your book or embrace it immediately?
Well, first, thank you for those kind words. I do get that response a lot from people reading my book. Not to sound like I've come down with some hubris here, but it can be life-changing for a lot of people. I'd say that's what I hoped for when I wrote it, and I had a feeling it was going to have a big impact. But it started out not selling a lot. Like it started out slowly, and then it took on a life of its own. It almost created, I don't want to say it created its own movement, but it really sort of helped build a community around the idea that children can play outside in all types of weather, and that nature should be a natural part of children's, younger years. And so as more and more people started to get their hands on it, the word just kind of spread, mouth to mouth. Like, it was amazing.
Were your Swedish friends like, Linda, why is this some kind of revolutionary book telling people to let their kids play outside? And American parents are like, whoa!
Yeah, when I've explained the book to my friends and told them about how I talk about like layering clothes and things like that, they look at me like, okay, so people don't like do that
They
or
don't
know how to do that.
And you're like, they really don't. I mean, how did your childhood in Sweden look like in contrast to trying to raise your own daughters in rural Indiana? Because you were living in the United States for a while. You had 2 daughters here, correct? And then now you're back in Sweden.
Yes. So to give you some background, I was born and raised in Sweden, but I moved to the U.S. when I was in my 20s, and I had my 2 daughters in Indiana. So that's where they grew up. That's where they spent their early years. And it was just a stark contrast to me. Of course, I came, coming from Scandinavia, I was wearing my cultural glasses and seeing everything from the outside, kind of. And, having grown up in a very sort of immersed in nature, because Scandinavia is very, sort of known for having a very nature-connected culture and lifestyle. We even have a word for it, friluftsliv, which is open-air life. And as a child, I grew up playing outside all the time, and nature is a part of where the environmental education starts young. It's in the curriculum for the preschool and all that. So it was very much ingrained in me, this notion that you play outside every day, like no matter the weather. And granted that we don't get hurricanes and tornadoes in Sweden, but of course this is just one of those sort of semi-true like parenting mottos. Like, of course, there's such a thing as hazardous weather, and you shouldn't subject your children to that. That goes without saying. But it's really helped me sort of overcome like this aversion to inclement weather that a lot of people feel, and that keeps people from enjoying nature all year round. So it's been a very powerful thing for me to know that my parents always sent me out regardless of the weather, or that they came out too. And I've always had this sort of fresh air is good for you. We dress for the weather. We go outside no matter what. Like, that's been part of my upbringing, and not just from my parents, but also from my preschool teachers. Like all the healthcare professionals encourage parents to go outside with their babies, and teachers and grandparents and all caregivers sort of create this outdoor or this village that helps raise outdoor loving children. And I believe strongly in this village, and that's what I missed coming to the US and having my kids there. I noticed that it was very different. I noticed especially as the temperature started to drop, like in the fall. People sort of went into hibernation mode, and I noticed that it was considered almost like abnormal to be outside.
Right.
I mean, I even had people stopping me.
Okay, so this is my one of my favorite parts of the book is you describe how Americans would treat you when they would just see you walking outside with your kids in cold winter months, and how their reactions were so funny to you. What were some of the bizarre things that people said or did when you were just pushing your kid in a stroller in the winter?
Yeah, well, I had people calling me brave for being outside, and I thought I was just out there playing, making snowmen with my kids, and they thought I was brave for being out in the snow. I had others tell me that it was dangerous for my kids to be outside because the temperature was too low. And then several times when I was out walking my daughter in her stroller when she was just a baby, I actually had people in their cars stop by and offering me a ride because they felt sorry for me. They took pity on me. They thought my car had broken down or something. It was unfathomable to them that I was just out for a walk because I actually enjoyed the cold weather.
Yes.
So Yeah.
Because despite ice, snow, sleet, rain, life just goes on for Scandinavians. And meanwhile, in some areas of the United States, you see one little snowflake, and that means that school is canceled. You say that
Yeah.
nature is really an integral part of everyday life for people growing up in Northern Europe. Could you elaborate on that and how it's just a part of normal everyday life to be in nature?
Yeah, I think it starts already in infancy. I'm going to say that it's a lifelong thing. So it starts in infancy when you take your baby outside for napping, and maybe we'll get into that more
Oh, yes,
more of
we
that
will.
later. I figure. Um, and then at preschool, the kids are outside daily. They actually are entitled to outdoor play. According to the national curriculum.
What you just said, children are entitled to outdoor play. It is seen as a right in Scandinavia.
Yes. Because it's so, it's so crucial to a healthy and normal development. That's why it's considered, if not the most important thing for them to do at preschool, during those early years. So, and preschools in Scandinavia functions a little differently than in the U.S. It's more like a daycare. So it's not just something that you do like a few hours per week. It's like a daycare for working parents. So, so the kids get it there, and then also at home. I think people really prioritize getting outside as a family. It's the friluftsliv that I was talking about earlier. So like after school and like on the weekends, families, really make a point of cutting out that time to get outside, enjoy nearby nature. Doesn't have to be grand adventure. I think the key here really is to focus on your nearby nature areas. And we do have a lot of access to nature areas here. So that's like the basics of it. And it's something that people enjoy sort of in all seasons of life. So adults too really make a point of getting outside as often as they can. It's about maximizing your outdoor time. So you try to eat your meals outside whenever you can. You try to maybe, go for a walk during your lunch or grab a picnic. And on the weekends, just getting outside for different, activities like foraging for mushrooms, or, in the fall, or skiing and ice skating in the wintertime. And it's just seasonally based, and it just depends on where you live and what you can do. But it is a very important part of the lifestyle here, and to stay healthy.
Is the United States the worst offender when it comes to living a sedentary indoor, primarily indoor lifestyle?
Oh, I don't know. I couldn't say that. And I think there's a lot of difference too within the U.S. So it's really hard to talk about the U.S. as one homogenous country, because I've lived in Montana and I've lived in Indiana, and those two states are worlds apart.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So, what's cold to a Montanan is not, or rather, what's cold to somebody in Florida is not necessarily considered cold in Montana, right?
Totally.
So,
now, this is what really broke my heart. You moved to the United States. You noticed that not only are kids not playing outside in the winter, they just don't seem to be playing outside ever. What were your initial thoughts when you noticed that there were just not kids playing outside?
It was a little shocking at first. And that's not to say that kids in Sweden play outside all the time either. I do think that the rise of electronic media has really been a game changer for kids everywhere. In Sweden, in the US, all over the world.
I was wondering that if Sweden has what I call iPad kids. Like when you go to a restaurant, are Swedish kids also just sitting there on their iPads?
Some are, yes. Some are. So that's definitely an issue, and I can elaborate on that. later. So I noticed that kids were playing outside, even though interestingly, I had a lot of older Americans tell me that, back in the day, like we played outside until the street lights went out, like mom had to call us in for dinner. Like, I think it's like that story. I don't know how many times I've heard that. So I know at some point in U.S. history, a few, maybe just a generation or two ago, it was also normal. It was considered normal because, I mean, let's face it, like back then, kids just didn't have the competition from the electronic media, of course.
I think it exactly correlates with the explosion and invention of social media in the 2010s. I think that is,
yes.
Because my childhood, I'm a 90s baby. I grew up also playing outside all day long with neighbor kids and stuff. And then once I was in middle school, that's when social media became invented. And that's when I started noticing changes. Last year, I found this card for Mother's Day that said, "You're my edamame," or something like that. It had two little edamames. And I always try to find really cute, funny little cards like that because my mom has a silly personality like me. If you want a little something extra to give your mom besides a card, and if she's a mom-servative like my mom, give her conservative-owned luxury skincare. That way, it's a 2-in-1 gift, skincare that really works to help reduce the appearance of fine lines and wrinkles. It brightens, it adds hydration and collagen, plus shares her same values of faith, family, femininity, and freedom. I guarantee she's going to be elated that she is not using the same products as Dylan Mulvaney because Nimi Skincare would never sell out women like that. At the risk of coming across as a total snob, I have never been a drugstore skincare girl, okay? I don't think that there are enough strong ingredients in them to really do anything. So when I first tried Nimi and I realized that I get all the high-powered ingredients I want in skincare like hyaluronic acid, peptides, and vitamin C, retinol at an affordable price, and they're from an openly conservative company, it was a home run. Get your mom or yourself Nimi Skincare by going to NimiSkincare.com with code Alex Clark for 10% off. That's NimiSkincare.com with code Alex Clark for 10% off, or just click the link in the description.
Yeah. And there were some other things too that I noticed that were starkly different from the culture in Scandinavia. And I think the fear is what struck me the most. There was so much fear surrounding parenting and being judged as a bad parent, and there was fear surrounding like your kids getting dirty. There's fear around your kids getting sick from being outside in the rain and cold. Fear about kids getting injured or abducted.
Yep. I have a lot of questions for you on this because this is a huge thing.
Yes, and even fears of your child falling behind, which has resulted in this sort of crazy hustle culture where kids are like booked up all the time to the point where they simply don't have any time to play because they have so many activities. And it's all done. I know it's all done with good intentions.
Of course,
parents want all the good things for their kids, and they want them to get a head start in life, and all that. But we're missing that play is such a, that's what it means to be a child. And it's in our genes, and it's just so important for kids to have that time to play and develop. That is learning. Playing is learning. And to parents in Scandinavia and teachers, nobody questions that. That's really, childhood is considered a sacred period where children are allowed to just be and play, and we're not like sort of chasing these imaginary milestones. And that was a huge difference from what I experienced in the U.S.
One of the biggest WTF moments while reading was you actually getting in trouble with the police for allowing your kids to play in the creek. You got to tell everyone this story.
Oh my gosh, yes. It was Memorial Day, and I had taken my girls to a local nature preserve, just 10-minute drive down from our house, a preserve that I'd taken them to dozens of times, like since they were newborn, and we had explored this preserve, all year round, and it was like nothing special about this day that we went there, except it was unseasonably warm. So my kids were, stripping off their clothes as they are, as they tend to do when they get warm and there's a creek nearby and they want to get in there and they want to get wet. So we just follow this little trail down to the creek as usual, and they kind of got into a little mud fight and played and splashed in the water. We got up and, just walked back to the trailhead, and there is this conservation officer parked in the parking lot, and I didn't think much of it. So I just, took the kids and we walked towards our car, and the conservation officer stopped me and said, actually, my daughter had run in ahead of me and said that the conservation officer had told her that we weren't allowed to play in the creek. And then he ended up issuing me a ticket for, I think it was like $120.
Oh my gosh.
For letting my kids play in the creek. And I was just so dumbfounded. I didn't know, like I felt ashamed because apparently we had broken like a rule that we didn't know of. Like we had left the trail, which wasn't allowed, but there was a trail. It just wasn't on like the official map. But obviously people had...
You were just so shocked by this. And then, I believe from the book, you described getting very frustrated. And then you were like, I feel like I need to speak out about this. This is just ridiculous. Yeah. We have such limited places outside, beautiful places where we can take our children. We take them there, and then we're only allowed to do, one thing, two things. We can't even enjoy the whole preserve. So you got some pushback. You ended up speaking about it, right? Like you blogged about it or something?
Yeah, I blogged about it, and that blog post just went viral. Like I had more visitors.
Were people agreeing with you or disagreeing with you?
A little bit of both. I think the locals who knew the preserve, and they were very supportive, and because they too take their kids there and let them play in the water, and they thought it was ridiculous, the whole rule. And the thing is, like, I understand the need for protecting places from being loved to death and so forth, but this was a rarely visited preserve. We were one of the regulars, and one of the few regulars, and usually we were all by ourselves there. And it was one of the few places within a half-hour drive that I could take my kids to, where there weren't cornfields and soybean fields, right? I mean, it's Indiana. There's very little public land available.
Yep.
Very little forest left. So I was very frustrated. I went through all the stages of mourning because I felt like this beautiful place where my kids had grown up and been able to explore nature with all their senses. All of a sudden, I had this officer tell me that the only thing we were allowed to do in the preserve was to walk on the trail. That was it. And I just thought to myself, if that's it, I'm not going to be able to take my kids back here because, at that age, they're not interested in walking on the trail. They want to explore. And sadly, that is the case for a lot of people. Access, to nature areas, it's an issue. So I think we need...
You made some really good points talking about how everything in American life is really purposefully designed in a way to separate human beings from nature. And, such as doing everything from your car during commutes, limited sidewalks, etc. And Americans really used to, like we talked about earlier, value this outdoor time and nature time. We talked about how once technology was invented, that was more or less abandoned. But what's hard for me to understand is Sweden, Denmark, other Scandinavian countries, you guys have the same tech as us, and yet somehow you still manage to prioritize nature. How?
I think it runs deep in our culture, like the open air life that I talked about, the friluftsliv. It goes back to the 1850s when the term was first sort of coined, and it goes back to this this longing for something pure, a longing for nature. And it was a reaction against industrialization and modernization that happened in the 1800s. People realized that they needed this bond with nature and to not view nature as something other than themselves, but something that we are a part of. So we need to have that connection and that everyday connection. So I think we just try to work it into our everyday lives. Like you said, in America, everything's designed for cars. And of course, that also has to do with the U.S. being a much younger country. So the cities are more sort of designed to be easily accessible with a car everywhere. Whereas in Europe, that's not the case.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's part of it. But there's a lot of there's a movement, to a children and nature movement growing in North America too. So there are a lot of pockets of that sort of coming now. So I'm hoping that we can sort of create that, and hopefully my book can help in a small way at least contribute to that.
Well, your book and then Jenny from 1,000 Hours Outside, I think both of you guys have had a significant impact on changing that for American parents lately.
Yeah, I do think that our social accounts, they overlap a lot, and I'm actually doing the challenge with my daughters now too. So fun. I think we complement each other very well. Now that my daughters are old, they're 12 and 15 now. They were like 4 and 7 in the book.
Yes. So now I have so many follow-up questions about their life too. Yeah. Now, okay, here's something else I was dying to ask you. And obviously the book was written before the pandemic, so this isn't in there, but now we know, even the way that Sweden handled the pandemic was just so different from the rest of the world. People called it the Scandinavian experiment while it was happening, but it really ended up paying off because you guys had the lowest death rates in all of Europe, I believe. Swedish kids were primarily, for the most part, allowed to stay in school. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, we had among the lowest death rates, yes.
Yeah. And so do you feel like that emphasis that Swedes placed on nature and being outside and consuming fresh air is ultimately what got you guys through the pandemic?
It definitely helped. I think, when a lot of social activities, like when a lot of indoor activities just shut down, people turn to nature like we always have. And I talk a little bit about this in my new book. That's just, it comes naturally to us. In times of grief, people turn to nature. People even, turn to nature for like spiritual reasons. It's like one of the most common ways to handle like a cancer diagnosis is, or losing a child, is to turn to nature. So it's like our default.
Well, I also just think being able to breathe fresh air, so many Americans, we were told literally do not even go outside of your home, like to even stand in your yard or on your sidewalk. Australians couldn't do that either, I'm pretty sure. So I wonder if just being able to breathe fresh air and get like actual sunlight made a difference for you guys.
Yeah, well, I can't speak for how it affected like infection-wise, but the studies that I've seen afterwards have shown that that a vast majority, of infections, so the transmission of the disease happened indoors. So outdoors was the safest place to be.
Right.
So it really, it did. It was a bit disheartening to see like all these playgrounds closing down and like kids not being, able to go to school and like all this. And there was just so much. It was so infected at the time, and there was so much controversy like surrounding everything. But like I feel like now everything, dust has settled a little bit, and we're able to look at the numbers a little more clearly. Yeah. And I do think that, Sweden, like we never had, our constitution didn't allow like a lockdown. You can't like, tell people not to leave their homes, like according to our constitution. So So all the parks remained open and people hit the trail, and more people than ever took part in like camping and hiking and things like that.
I learned recently how much of a game changer organ meat is. Now, it is nature's most concentrated source of every important vitamin. I honestly believe it is the most powerful superfood. So what is it? Well, it's things like beef liver, heart, or kidneys. And if you're like, okay, ew, there's no way I'm cutting into that. There's no way my kids or significant other will eat that. Here's a little trick that I like to do from your resident picky eater. You can trust me because I am the mayor of Picky Eatersville. Grab a food processor, sharp knife, high-quality grass-fed, grain-finished American ground beef from Good Ranchers, Redmond sea salt, pepper, garlic powder, sauteed onions if you want. You can fry them in beef tallow or grass-fed butter. Get a half a pound of liver cut into half-inch chunks and put all that in the food processor till it's just a teeny bit chunky. Well, everything minus just the ground beef, okay? You will add that mixture to your ground beef in a big mixing bowl, and there you will get some delicious hamburgers that everyone in your family will eat that are super healthy. Just don't screw it all up by using low-quality beef from China. Order your meat from Good Ranchers. Right now, with each new subscription, you will get $240 of free bacon in your first year. That is 1.5 pounds of bacon in every box. Good Ranchers has better than organic chicken, which means they go beyond just the feed to ensure that the entire life of the chicken meets a higher standard than just normal organic standards on all the farms that they use. Their seafood is packaged and flash frozen on the boat. Their seafood eating experience is really just unrivaled, is the best way I can put it. And when it comes to beef, if it's Good Ranchers, you know that it is from independent farmers in Middle America. And what I love about Good Ranchers is that your price is locked in from the moment you start a subscription. So you'll never have to worry about meat inflation. Every subscription gets Good Ranchers price lock guarantee. Enjoy the highest quality meat in America, 1.5 pounds of free bacon with any subscription, and $20 off any box when you go to goodranchers.com/Clark with code Clark. That's an additional $20 off any box when you go to goodranchers.com/Clark and use code Clark. Good Ranchers, American meat delivered.
And schools were still open, and my oldest daughter, she was in junior high school. They did like everyday school from home, remote school, from e-learning from home, just to have like fewer kids at school at a time. So they had like half the school present and half the school working from home at any given time. But yeah, it definitely helped us, I think.
Let's talk recess, because this floored me also. When you were living in Indiana, you were talking to the teachers and the people that worked at your child's school, and you were asking them about what kids are and aren't allowed to do. Talk about how absolutely restrictive recess is in the United States.
Yeah, that was another thing that shocked me a little bit. Like I realized pretty quickly that recess in the winter was usually indoor. That meant indoor recess, because it was usually too hot, or no, well, not in the wintertime, but it was too cold or too windy or too wet for the kids to be outside. I was told some of the kids didn't have the clothes for it, so therefore, none of the kids could go outside, which I spontaneously felt like, well, then let's try to solve the problem of some kids not having the gear. Can we do a coat drive or something like that? Because it's not solving the problem by keeping all kids inside. It's just creating like behavioral problems and things like that. And the teachers were, they knew that too.
And so what was their response? Did they like your idea of, well, let's just do a coat drive to get all these kids appropriate winter clothing to play outside?
Well, I think the teachers might have liked it, but it was just when I brought it to the administration, they just did not really jump on it. So,
gosh.
But also, what really upset me was that recess was used as leverage for to prevent or to punish kids for behavioral things. So So kids who were talking on the way to cafeteria and things like that could lose part of their recess, for example. And sometimes my daughters were made to stand like on a yellow line at like instead of running around playing as they should be during recess, because that's what their bodies crave for that little time that they had recess, which was not much. They were made to stand on the line for 5 minutes because somebody had like talked too loud in the cafeteria or something like that. And
there's so many problems with public school.
The whole class was punished for something that just one or a few kids had been doing. But
yeah.
And then the other issue, of course, is liability and parents complaining about kids doing things at recess. So, for example, if it snowed or if there was ice on like in the schoolyard, of course, the kids were by no means allowed to walk on the ice, because what happens if they slip and fall? Yeah, major liability issue there.
And how does that compare to how Swedish teachers treat all year-round recess?
So at my kids' school in Sweden, the parents would volunteer to like flush the schoolyard or a part of the schoolyard to make like a little ice hockey rink. And the kids would bring their ice skates and helmets to like ice skate during recess. So that says a lot. And another way to think of it is like my kids used to be nagging teachers for or their school for outdoor recess in the wintertime. Like, can we please go outside today? And like in Sweden, it's the other way around. It's like it's the kids asking the teachers, can we go inside now? Yeah, and when it's cold. So it's very different that way.
I don't understand why. It's hard for me to understand this huge gap between parents in the United States living in a perpetual state of fear of, I just don't want my kid to get hurt, so they can't be involved in any risky play whatsoever, to European parents being like, it's so good for them. I'm not worried at all. Here, we're going to make an ice rink for you.
Here. Yeah, here. Have a knife and a saw, too. And
yes!
Whittle yourself a little spear.
That's so true. Yeah. What was your reaction as a Swede to the food in American public schools?
I always packed my kids' lunches because I just didn't, partly because they don't, they're vegetarians, so they don't eat meat, and there wasn't really much for them to eat. And I was a little horrified, like with the fast food, and it just didn't seem to have like the nutritional value that that the kids really need to be their best. And like to know that for a lot of families, that's like their kids' main meal of the day. So yeah, I think the school lunches they do they do them better here. I have to say that. If I know I'm biased, but
what is So another thing is, what is your reaction to American parents who are constantly worried about their kids being abducted? And so that's why they're not allowed to ride their bike down the street or play at a park around the corner from their house without them.
Yeah. I mean, I can sympathize with that fear. I do not want to shame parents for having that fear. I know myself, like letting my kids play freely outside all the time. Like I remember one time when my oldest daughter, I don't know how old she was, but she was outside playing with the dog one day, and I was just getting the younger one dressed, and I wasn't like, I didn't leave her unattended for more than a few minutes, and I come back outside with the little one, and Maya is just gone. And then a few minutes later, the dog comes back, but without my daughter. And for the 5 or 10 minutes that I walked around looking for her, like, I didn't think she had been abducted, but just that feeling of, oh my God, where is my daughter? Like, I don't know where my daughter is. And she would have been probably like 4 or 5 at the time. It's just it's a horrible feeling. So emotionally, like on an emotional level, I can definitely I understand that. But then when you look at the statistics of it, and that's where our rational mind has to come in and like look at the statistics, and it's just so incredibly rare for a child to be abducted in America today that it's not even like statistically like relevant. It's like that rare. It's more, you're more likely, like your child is more likely to be hit by lightning. And that's the reality. But you know, we're not always rational. I mean, the most dangerous thing you can do with a child is, you know, put them
drive them in your car, probably.
Take them for a drive on the highway. But you know, we do that. Most people do that every day, and we don't think twice about it. So
that's very true. What baby steps can moms take to start feeling comfortable letting their kids play where they can't see them?
I think a great place to start is like the playground, or if you have a yard, you know, your backyard, or even for very little like for babies or toddlers, like you can even start inside your house, like to practice just leaving them unattended. Like if you're uncomfortable outside, start inside, you know, by being in a different room. And then once you're outside, practice, you know, gradually increasing the distance and the length of time that you're not constantly watching your child. And just like you said, just do it baby steps. And that way, and do it often, because then it doesn't become this like big thing. Oh, like today you're going to play by yourself and I'm not going to watch. But like if you do it often enough, it just becomes habit, and it's just not such a big deal. Then it's not this big threshold that you got to climb. It's just everyday life.
Do you feel like you have more freedom as a parent in Sweden or being a parent in America?
This is kind of a tricky question because, well, yeah, in a way, I feel like I have more freedom in terms of where I can take my kids for like outdoor recreation, definitely, and maybe being judged less just because of the way I raise my kids. I don't risk anybody judging me for letting them run barefoot, for example, which is kind of, frowned upon.
Okay, let's talk about this. Let's talk about why it is so important for parents to let their kids play outside barefoot.
Well, barefoot is like, that's our natural state, right? That's like, there are so many sensory endings in our feet. So, you know, being barefoot, like that it just helps your child experience their surroundings with all their senses. It helps their gait. And it's just nice, you know, it helps them feel at one with nature too.
I think it's a sensory thing that's important also too.
Yes.
There's a lot of like is that right? Nerve endings in a child's feet?
Ending. Yes, there are. And there are so many children today with sensory disorders.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and I feel like I think a lot of that has to do with them not being exposed enough, like early on, that we have removed ourselves from nature to the degree where kids can't like handle things like mud and that anymore because they it feels icky to them. Because
what about eating dirt? How good is it for kids to eat dirt?
Yes, eat dirt. Dirt is good. All kids eat dirt, and it's not that big a deal. Like, here, honestly.
Now, as a disclaimer, we're not saying serve up a plate of dirt, but
no, but it's not that big a deal. The thing is, dirt. We've come to associate dirt with pathogens, right?
Yes.
But the thing is, we have a lot of like in our microbiome, which researchers until just, you know, pretty recently didn't know that much about. Like, this is an under-researched topic, but we have like our gut biome. There are a lot of bacteria and other like germs in our guts that are absolutely essential to our immune systems and like all kinds of bodily functions. And they depend on like a healthy diet, of course, but also like just being outside and digging in the dirt where the vast majority of the bacteria are actually friendly bacteria. So there's just a small portion that are pathogenic. But I know people are really, a lot of people are worried about dirt and that, but
let me tell you my theory. Every time I see a family with young kids that is perpetually always sick, my first go-to thought is you're probably too clean. Your environment for your kids is probably too sterile. They're literally never around anything that's not been disinfected, so that if one teeny tiny germ ever, penetrates the barrier, they're done for.
Yes, that's the thing. Like our children's immune systems are not fully developed, so they need some challenges in order to develop. And so that's what you were talking about. That's the hygiene hypothesis. And one of those famous examples of that is how, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, how researchers, and I talk about this in my book too, researchers compared, children and living in West Germany, which was much more sanitized than East Germany, and they compared the children there, and they realized that the children in East Germany had way fewer like allergies and cases of asthma. And so the hypothesis was that because their living environments were not quite as clean and sterile, their immune systems had more time to practice, and that way they don't react against things that aren't dangerous to us, like peanuts, for example. And so, and then there have been other studies, like comparing Amish children, for example, with other children, and that have found sort of the same thing. So I think there's a lot of truth to that. Actually, we're too clean. Good.
One of the most shocking tenets of Danish parenting is letting a newborn baby sleep outside in the cold, even in public. You just park their stroller right outside of a restaurant and you leave them there. This has blown up on Instagram Reels and TikTok because it's funny. The Scandinavian parents are like, wait, this gets me a lot of views and stuff in America because American parents go wild when they see this. What is the reasoning behind this? How are Danish parents, Scandinavian parents not scared to do this?
Well, I mean, first of all, like I think most parents would park the stroller or pram like where they can see it, right? So it's outside a window. I wouldn't just go and park my kid and then go inside somewhere where I wouldn't see them, at least not for any longer amount of time. Like, if I'm just like running in and coming back out, But I mean, the reasoning behind it is pretty simple, really. Like you bundle your kid up to go outside in like single digit temperatures, right? So the kid has like a lamb's wool, sleeping on a lamb's wool. She's in a bunting bag. She's got like, wool base layer and then another layer on top of that, mittens and the hat. Like you don't want to take them inside. Like if you're out walking in town, you want to go into store or you're having coffee with a friend at a cafe, you're not going to interrupt your kids, nice nap by bringing them inside and risking that heat is going to wake them up because kids tend to sleep longer. They take longer and deeper naps outside. And so of course parents want to take advantage of that and they want to let them sleep. So to us, it's not that big a deal, even though I do think that it probably gets more attention on social media than it really deserves because it's not like there are strollers parked like on every street corner. But I mean, it happens, and it happens fairly often. But like
Now,
you said,
American moms say, well, the only reason Danish parents are able to leave their baby in a stroller outside is because they don't have as much crime as us. If they experienced as much crime as us, they would never do that. Do you agree or disagree?
I feel like a lot of people who say that are, well, I don't want to, I shouldn't generalize here, but I feel like the fear is very pervasive. And yes, I think to some degree that could be true. There are definitely neighborhoods in the US that are far more dangerous than the neighborhoods here. That doesn't mean we don't have crime. We definitely do. So you want to, but I mean, you choose there's a time and place for everything. So yes, you don't park your child outside by themselves in an area that you don't perceive as safe. But not, in a city center where there are plenty of people, like in the middle of the day, there are plenty of people out and about. A Scandinavian would do a very different risk assessment, I think, than a lot of Americans, and that's what got this Danish woman in trouble. And then back in the 90s that I talk about in the book too, Annika Sørensen, I think, who was arrested for doing this.
This was a very suspenseful part of your book. Is this Swedish woman visiting New York City and doing that? Could you tell us that? Or Danish woman.
Yeah. It was a Danish woman who was visiting her American boyfriend, and they were gonna have a meal, I think, at a restaurant, and she parked her baby daughter in the pram outside, and she was still able to see her through a restaurant, through one of the windows of the restaurant, but she didn't think it was a big deal. But somebody thought she was behaving recklessly with the baby and decided to call the cops. And she ended up being arrested, and her daughter was taken away from her for a number of days, actually. And while she was strip searched and kept at the police station for some time. So it made headlines over here because people thought, maybe it was a little naive of her to do this in New York City, where people, where it's not part of the culture to do that. So maybe that was a little naive, but to put her through all this and for her daughter to go through that trauma of being forcibly removed from her mom. And it was, it made quite the headlines. But what I was going to get to is that I think a lot of people who say that actually do in fact live in neighborhoods that are very safe, but I think there's a lot of fear still that we because there's so much crime in the news, and even though kids today are safer than they have been in previous generations, because of the 24/7 news cycle, and there's social media where these parenting groups where, I mean, I see them blow up all the time. Like somebody's seen a white van parked at the school as soon as and then then it's just on like and like, and I don't want to belittle that. I mean, it's good that people are looking out for the kids and all that, but it gets to a point where we're like seeing danger creeping everywhere. And the thing is, the people who are most likely to harm a child, unfortunately, are people who are close to them. I mean, we know, like, most assaults and like sexual assault and things like that, all those crimes are usually abductions. Vast majority, unfortunately, committed by somebody in the family. So, yeah.
You're absolutely right on that. You're absolutely right. What could an American mother tell her neighbors or family members that are giving her grief or questioning her parenting if she wants to do something like, hey, I'm gonna do the, what did you say, lamb's wool, sheepskin? I don't know. I'm gonna bundle my baby up so that they're not too cold. They're gonna feel the perfect temperature. They're gonna get fresh air. I'm gonna leave them on my porch to sleep. What would you tell them to say if they have people in their life being like, you're a terrible mother? What are you thinking?
Oh, just tell them that Scandinavians have done it for generations. She's going to be fine. And of course, like read my book. And I do have some good facts in there that they can use. But it is hard. It's hard to be that person that goes against the grain. I mean, I know because I've been there. And when you even have health professionals question your sanity, I mean, I had a reader email me not that long ago, and Scott, and he said he turned to me because he said he and his wife were expecting a child, and he wanted advice on how to dress the baby for their winter walks. He said, I asked our midwife, and she said, well, just don't take the baby out in the wintertime. It shouldn't be outside in the cold. But Scott had been, he was an expat, a former expat. He'd lived, abroad for well over 10 years. And he said, he knew that this is done in other cultures. So he wouldn't take that no for an answer. So that's why he emailed me. And
yeah,
and
you,
of course,
you
like
have lists. People, if you get Linda's book, There's No Such Thing as Bad Weather, she has little lists in there for everything, what you should, how your child should be dressed in spring, fall, winter, summer. You go through every season, exactly what items. I mean, you really set people up for success if you want to take advantage of, whether it's the 1,000 hours outside challenge or whatever you want to do, just getting your kids out more. She really sets you up in order to do that. Now, if it is sub-zero temperatures and you're wanting your child or your baby to stay in their stroller outside or their pram, which I think is way cooler to say, how long is acceptable for a baby to stay out there? Because people are like, no more than 30 minutes. Can it be hours?
It can be hours. I would sometimes wake my daughters up just because because they would sleep so soundly, and I just wanted them to have some sleep left in them come nighttime, because if they slept too many hours in the daytime, well, then bedtime was going to be an issue. So it's really hard to put a number on that. If it's very cold out, I would say just check on them regularly to make sure that they're not too cold. I mean, it's normal for hands and feet to be like a little colder than the rest of the body, but if you check their neck and chest, you can usually tell if they have a good normal temperature. I think it's a bigger risk to like overbundle the child than for them to freeze. I think more parents make that mistake. So then you can tell if they're if they feel too warm or even like a little sweaty, then they're probably a little overbundled. But as with everything else, when you get used to it, you get the hang of it so quickly. You get to know your baby. You know what you get into their habits and their sleep patterns. And if you're concerned, my advice would be to go out there with them while they sleep. And at least initially, and then you can tell, if you're comfortable, then, your baby is comfortable, and it seems less scary that way because you're still with them if you're not comfortable leaving them.
One of the most magical aspects of Swedish childhood to me is that you guys have all of this access to forest schools. What is a forest school? What do kids do there? What ages is it for?
Well, so forest school is just, it's a form of preschool. And I mentioned this earlier where preschool in Scandinavia is more like, it's like subsidized daycare for working parents. So they can be there all day, depending on your hours at work. And despite the name forest school, they don't have to be actually placed in the forest, right? It just... And actually, the whole term forest school that's of American origin, I think, because in Sweden they're called rain or shine preschools, and I think in Norway they're called just like outdoor schools. So basically, what they are, they originated in Denmark, and it's a pedagogical approach, and that sort of centers around having the kids outside for the majority of the day, all year round. So during the warmer seasons, they eat their meals outside, and they just explore outside. Usually they have some sort of nature area nearby that they can go to, but they're also outside playing, like in the yard. And they sort of, so it revolves around discovering nature. And the teachers, they call themselves like co-discoverers, and it's more about like asking questions and really instilling sort of a lifelong love of learning. And really that goes for pretty much any preschool, I think, in Scandinavia, but forest schools are even more so. And that like the environmental education component is very strong, and they use like this magical forest creature.
It's like Smokey the Bear, but it's a character
kind of like
over there. What is it's like a little monster.
It's a troll. It's a troll called Mulle. And so he teaches the children about like how to care for nature and how to not destroy
leaving it better than when you found it.
Yes, exactly.
And they're doing stuff like they're teaching kids how to start fires and cook over fire, cut with big knives. Little preschoolers. Now that would freak a lot of American parents out.
Yes. It's very hands-on. They believe in letting the kids use real tools, so they're not toy tools. They actually learn to start fires and like whittle and build things. A lot of them have like a little wood shop, and they often like cook meals over the fire and things like that, which the fire is also, it's also a form of like risky play, which is an integral part of the forest school pedagogical approach. The other thing about the forest schools is that the kids have actually really like better health outcomes than the kids at traditional preschool. That's one of the reasons why a lot of parents just love the concept of forest school. I think this forest schools here have like a queue of like so many parents want their kids to go to these schools, and there's a limited number. But when they compare, sick days, the kids who are outside more, they have fewer sick days than the kids at forest school. And of course, all this outdoor play, it has other benefits as well, like their motor skill development or motor skills. It helps them develop their motor skills like balance and so forth. And they also get that exposure to sunlight, as you were talking about.
And there are forest schools. There is not a lot in the United States, but I'm a psycho weirdo because, I just am into this stuff and I've looked it up. Yeah. There are some, like there's one in Boston, there's one in North Carolina, there's Tucson, Arizona. I mean, if you look up your state, you'll be able to see if there's forest preschools, or sometimes it's homeschool co-ops that will make like a little forest type of co-op or whatever. So there are things in America. Now, if you would have stayed in Indiana, Linda, do you think that your daughters would have turned out differently?
Yeah, maybe in a way. It's hard to speculate. What if that? I do think that they have a stronger outdoor village here for sure. And we do have more opportunities for outdoor recreation here than we did in Indiana. So that of course plays a big role. But we could have had that in Montana too. But the culture, I think, has shaped them here for sure.
What is your biggest wish for American children?
Oh, that felt like one of like a Miss Universe question.
Pose.
I see myself like on that podium or the catwalk or whatever it's called.
My biggest wish is...
Of course, my wish is that for every American child to grow up with a strong bond with nature, regardless of their ethnicity, their social and economic background, gender, regardless of geographic location, and that all children would have the same access to nature, of course.
Tell me about your most recent book. I am dying to read this one too.
Yes. So my new book is called The Open Air Life, and it delves deeper into friluftsliv, which I do talk a little bit about in my first book. And it's about this Nordic culture of exploring nature or connecting with nature in your everyday life. So it's sort of part practical handbook and part narrative. It's supposed, I want it to be a inspiration for people to get outside more in their everyday life and really sort of prioritize nature, and make it a part of their life. Because I think you can do that even if you live in the city, like to find those little green spaces where you can find that peace. Because it is an amazing feeling once you're out there among the trees and the birds. It can really, really enhance your quality of life. And frankly, I think it's one of the reasons why Scandinavian people are, constantly ranked, among the happiest in the world.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Linda, for coming on my little American show and sharing your amazing wisdom when it comes to parenting and cultivating a love of the outdoors with our kids. Please, I cannot stress enough, please buy There's No Such Thing as Bad Weather, and also her new book, Open Air Life, which I'm very excited to read. It's on my TBR, my to be read list. Thank you, Linda, for coming on the Spillover. And where can they find you on Instagram?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Alex. They can find me on Rain or Shine Mama is my handle, both on Instagram and pretty much all over the social media world.
Absolutely amazing. Well, it's morning time for me and it is nighttime for you. You're winding down, going to bed. I'm getting ready to start my day. So have a wonderful night's sleep. And I just am so happy to support you. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks again. Have a great day.
The real challenge that all of you can hold me accountable to in the future is, if I have children, will I really be able to spend a significant amount of time in the cold with them? I think it's gravely important, and it's a goal that I do want to hit. But also, to be totally transparent and honest, I hate being cold more than anything in the world. So hopefully my future family will be in Phoenix so I can kind of cheat my way through the winter seasons. Otherwise, I'll really have to walk the walk instead of just talk the talk. Here's my question after today's episode. Mom-servatives and even non-mom-servatives, would you let your baby sleep in their stroller outside or out in public without you in the cold? I really want to see your opinions on this in the Cute Servative Facebook group. The link to that is in the description, as is everything else that you need today from the episode. If you liked this episode, then you will really like the entire month of May, because we will be bringing back another themed month of episodes. It is very important also to leave a 5-star review for us, especially since the show is free. It is the most important thing you can do to support us. The Spillover is back next Thursday at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts, and also on the Politics YouTube channel. Now, let's have a little heart-to-heart. I like to always give you a hint on what next week is going to be about, but I am undecided on which episode I want to release. What I will say is that I'm essentially choosing right now between a guest that I think is legit and I learned a lot from, and a guest that I learned some from, but also might be slightly insane. And I mean that in a good way. Fun times. You'll have to guess next week which one it is based on the episode. Like, is this the crazy one or is this the one that Alex really liked? I'm Alex Clark, and this is The Spillover. Love you, mean it. Bye.